Here is the problem with most flowering container plants sold in America every spring. They look spectacular in the garden center. They look great the first 2 weeks on your porch. And then June turns into July. July turns into August. And what was a full, colorful container in May is now a leggy, tired, half-dead disappointment that you're either replacing or just trying not to look at. That is not a gardening failure. That is a plant selection problem. And it happens to experienced gardeners just as often as beginners, because the plants that sell best in spring are not the same plants that perform best through summer. The 10 plants in this video were chosen for one specific reason. They do not stop. Not in July. Not in August. Not when the temperature hits 95 degrees and the humidity makes everything else on the porch look exhausted. These plants bloom from the time you put them in the container all the way through the first hard frost. And several of them come back and do it again next year without being replaced. Plant number 4 blooms harder in heat than it does in cool weather. The opposite of almost every other flowering plant available. Plant number 8 produces so many flowers simultaneously that the foliage underneath disappears completely. And plant number 10 is the one that makes the neighbors stop their cars. Drop your US state in the comments before we start. Your USDA hardiness zone tells you which of these 10 will overwinter in your specific containers and which ones you'll treat as seasonal performers. Both categories are on this list. And both deliver nonstop color all summer long. We're calling out zones throughout the entire video. If Garden Senior Living is not yet in your subscription list, subscribe before this video ends. Practical, honest, zone-specific container gardening content goes out every single week. The kind of information that stops you from wasting another spring on plants that won't make it to September. Leave without subscribing and the next video may not find you. Let's get into the plants. Plant 1. Catmint/Nepeta, Walker's Low. Plant 1 produces nonstop color from May through October with one trim and almost no water. And it does it while the most popular container plant in America, the petunia, is struggling to look presentable in August. Catmint Walker's Low blooms in continuous cascading waves of lavender blue from late spring through fall. 6 full months of color. The mounding, slightly arching form, 18 to 24 inches tall, spills forward naturally along container edges and porch railings in a way that looks professionally placed rather than accidental. The fragrant silvery green foliage is the reason deer, rabbits, and biting insects leave this plant almost entirely alone all season. Color, fragrance, pest deterrence, and wildlife friendliness. Butterflies are strongly attracted to the flowers, from one plant that costs a few dollars and comes back stronger every year. Here is the one technique that separates gardeners who get 6 months of nonstop color from those who get 3 months and a decline. When the first bloom flush begins fading in early July, cut the entire plant back by half. It looks severe for 10 days. Then it returns with a second wave of flowers that is frequently heavier and more saturated than the first. Skip that cut and you leave 6 to 8 weeks of color on the table every single summer. Cat's Meow is more compact and entirely self-cleaning. Blooms without any deadheading. The best choice for smaller containers or gardeners who want the absolute minimum involvement. Walker's Low remains the benchmark for standard containers. 6 Hills Giant anchors a large statement pot on a front porch or deck better than almost anything in this size category. Zones 3 through 8. Full sun. Once weekly watering once established. 2 bloom cycles per season from one cut at the right moment. Plant 2. Impatiens, Calibrachoa/Million Bells. Plant 2 produces more individual flowers per square inch than any other container plant on this list. And it does it without a single moment of deadheading. Calibrachoa, sold under the trade name Million Bells, covers itself in a continuous cascade of small petunia-like flowers in every color imaginable. Coral, yellow, purple, red, pink, white, orange, and multicolor combinations that shouldn't logically look as good as they do. Each flower is roughly the size of a nickel, but a single trailing plant produces hundreds of them simultaneously, cascading down the sides of a container in a sheet of color that reads beautifully from across the yard. The self-cleaning habit is what puts Calibrachoa on a low-maintenance list. Spent flowers drop on their own. The plant never needs deadheading to keep producing blooms. It simply keeps going, continuously, from planting time through the first frost. No pinching, no trimming, no weekly removal of faded flowers. The plant handles that entirely by itself. It is a heavy feeder, which is the one maintenance requirement worth knowing up front. A slow-release granular fertilizer worked into the soil at planting, followed by a liquid feed every 2 to 3 weeks through summer, keeps bloom production at its peak. Skip the feeding and the flower output drops noticeably by midsummer. Maintain it, and Calibrachoa is one of the most consistent all-summer performers available to American container gardeners. Superbells is the most widely available series with the broadest color range. Kabloom is more upright and more suitable for mixing with taller container companions. Colorburst produces slightly larger individual flowers for a bolder, less delicate visual effect. Treat as an annual in all zones. Replant each spring. Full sun to partial shade. Consistent moisture. Does not tolerate drought. Pair with other moisture-loving plants in mixed containers. Plant 3. Coreopsis/tickseed. Plant 3 blooms all summer in the exact conditions that make most other flowering plants give up entirely. Full blazing sun. Intense July heat. 6 weeks without significant rain. The conditions that have a south-facing container bed looking defeated by the end of July are precisely the conditions under which Coreopsis produces its densest bloom coverage and its longest season. Coreopsis moonbeam is the variety that earned formal recognition from professional horticulturists. Named Perennial Plant of the Year in 1992 and still appearing on recommended planting lists for virtually every region of the continental United States more than 30 years later. That staying power is performance, not sentiment. The visual is a genuine soft cloud, small buttery yellow flowers held just above fine feathery green foliage on a mounding plant roughly 18 inches tall and equally wide. The color is warm without being harsh, and it works beside deep purple salvia, white daisies, or bold red daylilies without clashing against any of them. Between the heaviest bloom periods, the foliage alone reads as full and well kept, important for a container that needs to look tidy all season, not just during a 2-week flowering peak. Coreopsis spreads from underground rhizomes and ground plantings, but in containers, the restricted root environment keeps it tidy and focused. It blooms harder, not less, when the roots are somewhat restricted. Coreopsis is native to the prairies, open woodlands, and roadsides of North America. From Ontario through Florida, it did not adapt to American summer heat after being brought here. It evolved inside those conditions over thousands of years before it was ever placed in a cultivated garden. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun essential. Partial shade cuts bloom production noticeably. Average to lean soil. Water consistently through the first season, then back off. No fertilizer needed. The perennial that solves the problem of a south-facing container bed baking through August. Plant 4. Portulaca/moss rose. Plant 4 blooms harder in heat than it does in cool weather, the opposite of almost every other flowering plant available to American gardeners. Most container plants that perform well in spring begin declining as summer heat intensifies. Portulaca does the opposite. As temperatures climb through July and August, the bloom production on this plant increases. The hotter and drier the conditions, the more flowers appear. It is one of the very few container plants in existence that genuinely thrives on neglect and punishes overattention. The flowers are semi-double to double, silky textured and available in a saturated range of rose, coral, yellow, orange, white, cream, and magenta that is almost tropical in its intensity. Each flower opens in full sun and closes in the evening and on overcast days, a characteristic that makes a container of Portulaca look like it resets itself each morning with a fresh, full display. The succulent leaves and stems store water internally, making Portulaca extremely tolerant of mist watering. It handles 1 to 2 weeks without supplemental water in the heat of summer and recovers without lasting damage. For container gardeners who travel through summer or simply find regular watering difficult to maintain, this plant's built-in drought tolerance is genuinely practical. Afternoon shade in the hottest climates, zones 9 and 10, keeps the flowers producing longer into the day. In zones 5 through 8, full sun all day produces the maximum bloom coverage. Treat as an annual in all zones. Full sun essential. Shade reduces bloom to almost nothing. Lean to average soil. Minimal watering once established. No fertilizer required. The container plant that rewards every hot, dry stretch of the summer rather than declining through it. Plant 5. Salvia/annual. Salvia and Salvia May Night. Plant 5 delivers the most visually saturated color on this entire list. A blue-purple so intense that first-time viewers regularly ask whether it is real. And it does so while feeding every pollinator in the neighborhood simultaneously. Salvia May Night, the perennial option, produces tall, upright flower spikes in deep violet blue rising 18 to 24 inches above a base of dark green, strongly aromatic foliage. The color is not soft or pastel. It is bold and confident in a way that reads from across the yard and provides instant structural variety that most home containers lack entirely. Against a mass of yellow Coreopsis or white Calibrachoa already in the container, the contrast looks deliberately designed. Cut the plant back by half after the first bloom flush, and it pushes a second complete wave of flowers within 3 to 4 weeks. 2 full bloom periods per season from one perennial that returns every year. Annual salvias, particularly Salvia splendens and Salvia farinaceae, bridge the gap for gardeners in zones outside May Night's hardiness range. Victoria Blue. Salvia farinaceae produces brilliant deep blue flower spikes continuously from planting through frost, self-cleaning and requiring no deadheading. The bloom window is one of the longest of any flowering annual available to American container gardeners. The aromatic compounds in salvia foliage that create the distinctive scent are also precisely what make deer and most insects consistently avoid the plant. For gardeners dealing with open, exposed container areas where deer pressure is a constant problem, salvia holds up without any intervention whatsoever. May Night perennial, zones 4 through 8, annual salvias, all zones, full sun, well-drained soil. Standing water is fatal to this plant. Drought-resistant once established. 5 plants in. Which of these are already in your container lineup this season? Drop the name and your zone in the comments. And if you found a plant that blooms all summer in containers in your specific climate, share it below. Because gardeners reading in your zone will find that information more useful than anything said from this side of a camera. Garden Senior Living covers this kind of specific, honest, zone-by-zone container gardening guidance every single week. If this video has already given you something useful, the subscribe button is the decision worth making before this video closes. Plant 6 betas makos perse. Lantana. Plant 6 thrives in the conditions that shut down every other flowering container plant by midsummer, and it attracts more butterfly species per planting than almost anything else a container gardener can grow. Lantana produces rounded clusters of small flowers in combinations that shift color as the blooms age. Yellow aging to orange, aging to red on the same flower head simultaneously, or pink and purple together, or white and yellow. The multicolor effect on a single plant is one of the most visually distinctive characteristics in container gardening, and it is entirely natural, requiring nothing from the gardener to produce. Heat and full sun are not obstacles for Lantana. They are the conditions under which it performs at its absolute best. A Lantana in a container in full afternoon sun in July and August produces more blooms, more consistently, than the same plant in cooler partial shade. Watering every few days rather than daily suits it perfectly. It tolerates dry periods without complaint and resents consistently wet soil. Monarchs, swallowtails, fritillaries, and hummingbirds treat established Lantana plantings as a primary summer food source. In suburban neighborhoods where nectar sources are limited, a container of Lantana in full bloom becomes one of the most active wildlife destinations on the block. Bandana series is compact and ideal for container use, producing continuous bloom without becoming leggy. Landmark series offers a wider color range and slightly more upright habit for larger statement containers. Luscious series is trailing and exceptionally suited for mixed container arrangements where a cascading element is needed. Perennial in zones 8 through 11. Treat as an annual in zones 4 through 7. Replant each spring. Full sun essential. Well-draining soil. Moderate water. Note: Lantana berries are toxic if ingested. Relevant for households with young children or pets. Plant 7. Bacopa/Pseudora cordata. Plant 7 is one of the most underrated all-summer bloomers in American container gardening. A plant that most gardeners have walked past at the nursery every single spring without picking up, and that produces a display most of them have been trying to achieve with far more demanding plants. Bacopa produces thousands of tiny star-shaped flowers, white, pink, or lavender, on trailing stems that cascade gracefully over the edges of containers and hanging baskets in a soft, delicate curtain of continuous color. The individual flowers are small, but the sheer volume of bloom production means the trailing stems are almost completely covered at any given point from May through October. The self-cleaning habit is what makes Bacopa genuinely low maintenance. Spent flowers drop on their own, no deadheading required at any point through the season. The plant handles heat waves better than it is given credit for, though it appreciates consistent moisture during the hottest weeks. A brief period of heat stress may cause temporary bloom reduction, but a good watering and a few days of cooler weather bring it back to full production without any other intervention. In mixed containers, Bacopa fills the spiller role. The cascading element that softens container edges and bridges the visual gap between tall, upright plants and the rim of the pot, better than almost any other plant at the same price point. Paired with upright salvia or lantana above it and trailing Calibrachoa beside it, Bacopa completes the thriller-filler-spiller combination that produces the most visually complete container displays. Snowstorm Giant Snowflake produces the largest individual flowers of any white Bacopa variety, with more visual impact from a distance. Abunda Gold has chartreuse foliage that makes the white flowers pop even more dramatically. Scaupia series offers the widest color range, including lavender and deep pink options. Treat as an annual in all zones. Full sun to partial shade. Partial shade extends bloom production in zones 8 and warmer. Consistent moisture. No deadheading required. Plant 8. Impatiens/New Guinea Impatiens. Plant 8 produces so many flowers simultaneously that the foliage underneath disappears completely. And it does it in the one growing condition that defeats most other flowering plants on this list: shade. While the majority of plants covered in this video require full sun to produce peak bloom, New Guinea Impatiens is the shade solution. The answer to the north-facing porch, the container that sits under a deep overhang, the shaded entryway that every other flowering plant declines in. Placed in conditions where Calibrachoa and Portulaca would struggle to produce a single flower, New Guinea Impatiens covers itself and blooms from planting time through the first frost without a pause. The flowers are large, up to 2 to 3 inches across, in coral, red, salmon, orange, purple, white, and bicolor combinations. The dark, glossy foliage provides an attractive backdrop even between the heaviest bloom periods, but during peak production, the flowers cover the plant so completely that the foliage beneath them is invisible. Unlike traditional bedding impatiens, New Guinea Impatiens is resistant to the downy mildew that wiped out standard impatiens plantings across much of the country in recent years. Choose resistant varieties, Divine, Infinity, and Bounce series, for the most reliable, disease-free performance across all U.S. regions. Consistent moisture is essential. New Guinea Impatiens will wilt dramatically during dry stretches and recover quickly once watered, but repeated stress cycles shorten the overall bloom window. In containers, where soil dries faster than in-ground, daily checking during peak summer heat is worthwhile for this plant specifically. Treat as an annual in all zones. Partial shade to full shade. Direct afternoon sun in hot climates damages the foliage and reduces bloom. Consistent moisture. Balanced fertilizer every 2 weeks maintains peak bloom production. Plant 9. Million Bells, trailing Verbena/Verbena hybrida. Plant 9 carries the season from early summer straight through October frost with a heat tolerance that makes it one of the most reliable performers on this entire list, and a color range that covers every combination a container designer could want. Trailing Verbena produces dense clusters of small flowers on spreading, branching stems that cover the surface of a container and cascade over the sides simultaneously. The clusters themselves are rich and saturated, deep purple, bright red, coral, pink, white, and bicolors, and they appear continuously from the first warm weeks of spring through the final frost of fall without a significant break. The heat performance is what distinguishes Verbena from many other trailing container plants. Where Calibrachoa may show mild stress during the hottest weeks of August, and Bacopa may briefly reduce bloom production during a heat wave. Trailing Verbena continues performing at full capacity through sustained high temperatures. In the hot, humid summers of the South and Mid-Atlantic states, conditions that exhaust most container plants by midsummer, Verbena holds its blooms, production, and its color saturation without faltering. Deadheading spent flower clusters extends bloom production and keeps the plant looking tidy, though the plant will continue producing even without it. A light shearing in midsummer removes any leggy growth and encourages a fresh flush of blooms that carries the plant through to frost, looking full and well-maintained. Verbena series is the most widely available and one of the most heat-tolerant selections, specifically bred for sustained performance in American summer conditions. Lantana series offers a wider spreading habit ideal for large mixed containers and window boxes. Aztec series produces exceptionally large flower clusters with deep saturated color. Treat as an annual in most zones. Perennial in zones 9 through 11. Full sun. Average to lean soil. Moderate water. More drought tolerant than most trailing annuals once established. Plant 10. Angelonia/summer Snapdragon. Plant 10 is the one that makes the neighbors stop their cars. Not because it shouts, because it does something that very few container plants manage. It looks genuinely elegant and genuinely effortless at the same time. And it does it through July, August, and September when everything around it is either being heavily managed, replaced, or both. Angelonia, commonly called summer snapdragon, produces graceful upright spikes of small orchid-like flowers in deep purple, lavender, pink, white, and bicolor combinations from spring through frost. The spikes rise 12 to 24 inches above fine, slightly fragrant foliage that smells faintly of grape candy when touched. The overall effect is refined and vertical. It introduces a structural elegance to container arrangements that trailing and mounding plants cannot provide on their own. The heat performance is exceptional. Angelonia was developed specifically for hot climate gardening and performs at its absolute best when temperatures are high and conditions are dry. It never sulks through August the way snapdragons do. It does not need replacing when the season gets difficult. It treats summer heat as the conditions it was built for, blooming continuously through the hottest stretch of the season with no reduction in flower production. Deadheading is optional. The plant continues producing without it, though removing spent spikes encourages faster reblooming. The foliage is naturally pest and disease resistant, and deer avoid it reliably due to the aromatic compounds in the leaves. Serena series is compact and ideal for standard container sizes, producing abundant bloom at 12 to 14 inches without becoming leggy. Archangel series is taller and more dramatic, suited for large statement containers where vertical presence is a priority. Angel Mist series is widely available and one of the most color-consistent Angelonia selections for American container gardeners. Treat as an annual in zones 5 through 8, perennial in zones 9 through 11, full sun, well-draining soil, drought-tolerant once established, reduces water as the season progresses and the plant is fully settled. The container plant that makes experienced gardeners stop, look twice, and ask what it is. 10 plants. Nonstop color, all summer long. Here is every one of them. Catmint Walker's Low. 6 months of lavender blue bloom, 1 mid-season trim for a second full flush, deer-resistant, perennial zones 3 to 8. Calibrachoa. Hundreds of self-cleaning blooms simultaneously, no deadheading ever, all zones as annual. Coreopsis Moonbeam. Blooms harder in heat and drought. Buttery yellow cloud of flowers, perennial zones 3 to 9. Portulaca. More flowers as temperatures rise, built-in drought tolerance, ideal for hot neglected spots, all zones annual. Salvia. Deep violet blue spikes, 2 bloom cycles per season, deer and pest resistant, perennial zones 4 to 8 / annual all zones. Lantana. Multicolor shifting flower clusters, peak performance in full summer heat, monarch butterfly magnet, perennial zones 8 to 11. Bacopa. Thousands of tiny self-cleaning flowers, perfect cascading spiller for mixed containers, all zones annual. New Guinea Impatiens. The shade solution. Blooms so densely the foliage disappears. Mildew-resistant varieties, all zones annual. Trailing Verbena. Heat-tolerant all-summer performer, dense saturated clusters, reliable through August humidity, perennial zones 9 to 11. Angelonia. Elegant orchid-like spikes, built for summer heat, grape-scented foliage, the container plant that draws compliments, perennial zones 9 to 11. A container that blooms all summer is not about watering more. It is not about fertilizing more. It is not about spending more time on your knees with a pair of scissors deadheading every 3 days. It is about choosing plants whose natural performance window matches the season you are trying to fill. Every plant on this list was chosen because it does not stop in August, because it does not require replacement at midsummer, because it keeps delivering the color, the fragrance, and the garden presence you wanted when you filled the container in the first place. All the way through to frost. That is the container garden that makes gardening feel rewarding rather than relentless. Which of these 10 are you adding to your containers this season? Drop the number in the comments. And if you have a plant that blooms all summer in containers in your specific climate that is not on this list, share it below. Because the most useful information in the comments section is always from gardeners who have grown something through their own summers in their own zones. If this video gave you even one plant worth trying, the like button is how you help other gardeners find this information. One tap puts it in front of someone who needs it before this planting season goes any further. Garden Senior Living publishes a new video every single week. Next week we are covering the exact container setup, soil mix, pot size, drainage, and winter positioning, that makes every plant on this list perform at its absolute peak. Get the plants right and the setup wrong and you leave real results on the table. Subscribe so that video finds you automatically. Now go fill those containers with plants that are going to earn their space every single day of the summer. Garden Senior Living, non-stop color, all summer long.